You have been told that if you want something badly enough, you can make it happen. That belief has kept you searching for peace, searching for enough, searching for the version of your life that finally feels right. The Buddha saw this clearly. He watched people chase and build and want, and he saw where it led. Then he turned the whole idea around, not with a grand teaching, with one quiet observation that changes everything. Tonight, you will hear that observation, and it will not feel like a lesson. It will feel like putting something down. Let your body settle wherever you are. Lie down if you can. Pull something warm around you. Let your hands go still. There is nothing to do for the next 3 hours except listen. Here is what will happen. The restless feeling, the one that says, "You are not where you are supposed to be," will begin to fade. The weight of wanting will ease in your body, and a stillness you have been looking for in the wrong places will become obvious. It was never far away. It was never something to create. The Buddha knew this. Tonight, you will feel it for yourself. Take one breath. Feel where you are. Let the sounds around you exist without naming them. You are already here. If it feels right, share where in the world you are listening from tonight. Right now, across the earth, people are settling into this same stillness. Stay. Every person alive right now wants something better, a quieter mind, a life with less weight in it, a feeling that the ground beneath you is solid. For a very long time, thousands of years, people have believed the way to get there is to make it happen, to want hard enough, to arrange things correctly, to build the right life, in the right place, with the right people around you. If the outside world looks the way it should, peace will come. This belief is everywhere. It runs through how we make decisions, how we measure success, how we judge whether a day was good or bad. The Buddha lived among people who carried this belief. Merchants who thought wealth would quiet the restlessness. Kings who thought control would bring calm. Monks who believed that years of painful discipline would set them free from suffering. He watched all of them try. He watched them push and plan and sacrifice. And he noticed something none of them had stopped long enough to see. The harder you run toward peace, the more your mind is focused on the running. And while it is focused on the running, it cannot be still. And while it cannot be still, it cannot notice what is already there. The peace they were searching for was not at the end of anything. It was not a reward waiting after enough effort. It was already present, already awake, quietly sitting inside the most ordinary moments of the day, the ones that people rush past without a second glance. And what he saw will change the way you understand your own ordinary Tuesday morning. This is not about giving up on wanting a good life. It is about discovering that peace is not something you build from the outside in. It is something you notice from the inside out. The Buddha did not teach people to stop living. He taught them to stop missing what was right in front of them. There is a woman in a small town in southern Japan. Her name is not important. What is important is her morning and what happened in it. She wakes before 6. The alarm pulls her out of sleep, and immediately, before her eyes are fully open, her mind starts. The list arrives. The email she hasn't answered. The conversation from yesterday that went wrong and that she replayed 3 times before bed. All of it arrives at once, like a door opening onto a loud room. By the time she reaches the kitchen, her shoulders are tight. Her jaw is set. She pours the coffee and drinks it without tasting a single sip. She moves through the house getting ready, and the whole time, her mind is talking, commenting, judging, worrying. She doesn't notice any of it because it has always been this way. This is just what mornings are. This is just what life feels like. On this particular morning, she steps outside to check the weather before leaving. The air is cool. The light is thin and grey. The street is quiet. And then, a single leaf falls from the tree above her. It falls slowly, the way leaves fall when there is almost no wind, a gentle release, drifting down in a lazy curve, taking longer than you would expect. She watches it, not because she decides to. Her eyes simply follow it, and for a few seconds, maybe 3, maybe 4, everything in her mind goes quiet. No list, no worry, no replay of yesterday, just the leaf turning slowly in the air and the cool morning on her skin and the weight of her feet on the ground beneath her. 3 seconds of peace she did not go searching for. 3 seconds she did not earn or create. They simply arrived because she noticed something real. It was sharp. It was clear. It was alive. This is exactly what the Buddha taught. Not a technique you have to master. Not a practice that takes years to perfect. A turn. A simple, quiet turn of attention, away from the noise that fills your head, toward what is actually happening around you. What you can see right now, what you can hear right now, the warmth or the coolness of the air on your skin right now, the weight of your body where it rests. These are not small things to notice. These are the doorways. The leaf was a doorway. You walk past dozens of them every single day. Now, here is what is fascinating about what happened to the woman after the leaf fell. She went back inside. She finished her coffee. She went about her day the same way she always did. Nothing changed on the outside, but something had shifted on the inside. Something small and quiet, like a key turning in a lock you didn't know was there. That 3-second pause had started something she could not have predicted. Because once you notice one thing, truly notice it, your mind begins to slow. Not all at once. Gradually. The way a river slows as it meets a lake. The current is still there, but it loses its force. The chattering in your head does not disappear, but it loosens its grip. And in the small space that opens, in that loosening, you begin to feel something you have been too busy to feel for a very long time. Stillness. Not the stillness of being tired, not the stillness of giving up. An awake stillness. A stillness that is alert and present. The kind that makes ordinary things feel different. A cup of tea suddenly has a taste. A patch of sunlight on the floor suddenly feels warm. A bird outside the window suddenly sounds like something worth listening to. The woman came back to this feeling. Over the following days, she began to catch other moments, like the one with the leaf, the warmth of water on her hands while washing dishes, the smell of rice cooking, the sound of the train passing at a distance. Each time she truly noticed, the same thing happened. The noise quieted. The tightness in her body eased. The day felt less like something to survive and more like something to be inside of. Now, if all of this sounds easy, it is. But here is where most people stumble. Your mind does not want to be quiet. This is not a flaw in you. This is simply what a mind does when no one is watching it. It talks. It comments on everything. It argues with itself. It replays old conversations. It rehearses arguments that will probably never happen. It tells you stories about the future, stories that may never come true, and it tells them so vividly that your body responds as though they are already happening. A racing heartbeat, a tightness in the chest, a sick feeling in the stomach, all from words and images that exist only inside your head. The Buddha watched minds do this. He watched people suffer from thoughts, not from what was actually happening in their lives, but from the stories their minds were telling them. And he compared the untrained mind to a monkey. Picture a monkey in a tree. It does not sit still. It swings from one branch to the next, and then the next, without stopping, without resting, without ever settling on a single branch long enough to breathe. That is what your mind does, all day, every day. And most people believe they are that monkey. They believe the noise is who they are. But the Buddha taught something different. You are not the monkey. You are the tree. The monkey will keep swinging. That is what monkeys do. Trying to silence your thoughts is like trying to make a river stop flowing. You can stand in the middle of it and push against the water all day. Or you can step onto the bank. And from the bank, you can see the water clearly without being carried by it. The woman with the leaf did not stop her mind that morning. She didn't need to. Her attention moved, gently, without force, from the noise to the leaf, from the list and the worry to the cool air and the ground beneath her feet. And in that shift, the noise was still there, but she was no longer inside it. She was on the bank, watching. This is why people feel so drained at the end of the day, not always because of what happened to them, but because they spent every hour listening to the monkey. Every thought it had, they heard. Every story it told, they believed. Every fear it raised, they felt in their bodies. By evening, they are exhausted, and they don't even know why. The mind is not your enemy. The Buddha never said that. The mind is extraordinary. It can solve problems. It can build things. It can imagine worlds that don't exist yet. But when it runs without pause, when it is never watched, it becomes noise. And noise, when you live inside it, wears you down to nothing. So the teaching is not stop thinking. The teaching is notice that you are thinking. Noticing that you are thinking is like opening a window. The air moves through. The thought passes. You don't have to push it anywhere. That one shift, from being inside the thought to seeing it pass, from being the monkey to being the tree. Each time you make that shift, even for a moment, the gap widens. Not forever, but enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to feel the ground beneath you again. You do not need to sit in any particular position. You do not need to clear your mind. You just need to notice the leaf, the sound of this voice right now, the feeling of your body where it is resting, the thought your mind just had, and the fact that you heard it. Every single one of these is the practice. It doesn't matter where you are. A bus on a quiet morning, a cold waiting room. You can notice in all of these places. No one will see you do it. It asks nothing of you except your attention. The woman did not become peaceful overnight. What happened was smaller than that, and quieter. She learned to notice, again and again. Each time, the space opened a little wider. Each time, the noise lost a little more of its grip. Over weeks, the mornings changed. Not because her life changed, because she stopped missing what was already there. She was the tree. She had always been the tree. The monkey was just visiting. This is the quiet revolution the Buddha offered. Not a dramatic change in how you live, a change in how you see. And once you start noticing, once you begin to see, you will start to see something about yourself that most people spend their entire lives missing. Something quiet, something that was there before the noise began, something that has been there, underneath everything, this whole time. Your mind has been telling you a story about who you are. It started a long time ago, maybe when you were very young. Someone said something about you. A teacher, a parent, another child in the schoolyard. And your mind picked it up. It turned it over. And somewhere, quietly, it decided, this is who I am. There was a man in a fishing village on the coast of India. When he was 7 years old, he broke a neighbor's fence during a game with other children. It was an accident, but the neighbor was angry, and the neighbor said to him, in front of the other children, "You are the angry one." The boy did not understand what that meant, but his mind understood. It took those words and held them. And from that day on, whenever he felt any frustration, any irritation, any discomfort, his mind would say, "See, this is who you are. You are the angry one." By the time he was 20, he believed it completely. He believed this the way you believe the sky is blue. It felt like fact. He carried this for years. It shaped how he treated people. It shaped how he saw himself when things went wrong. Every time he raised his voice, and he raised it often, because he was convinced that was simply who he was. The label confirmed itself. The angry one. There it is again. He did not question it. Why would you question something that feels so obviously true? One afternoon, he was walking along the coast. The water was calm. The air was warm. Nothing was happening. No one was demanding anything of him. He was just walking, and the waves were just moving, and the sun was just there. And in that moment, for maybe 30 seconds, he noticed something. He was not angry, not even a little. There was nothing in his body that felt like anger, nothing in his mind, just the sound of the water and the warmth on his face. 30 seconds. That was all it took for the label to crack. Because in those 30 seconds, he understood something he had never understood before. The story his mind had been telling him, the angry one, was not a fact about who he was. It was a thought that had been repeated so many times it felt permanent. But it was not permanent. He had just proven it. In 30 seconds of noticing, the story lost the ground it had stood on for 20 years. This is what the mind does. It takes a single moment, a word spoken, a feeling that passed through, and it builds an entire identity from it. Not deliberately, not because you asked it to. It simply does this, the way a vine grows toward light. The label feels like you. The story feels like the truth about who you are. But you are not your labels. You are not the stories your mind collected when you were 7, or 15, or 30. Those are thoughts. And thoughts, even the ones that feel the most solid, are not facts. But here is the thing. The mind doesn't just tell stories about you. It tells stories about everything. About other people. About what will happen tomorrow. About what should have happened yesterday. And each of these stories carries a feeling with it. That is where suffering begins. There is a monk who lives in a monastery in the hills of Sri Lanka. He has lived there for over 30 years. People who visit notice one thing about him before anything else. He smiles. Not the polite smile you give when someone greets you. A real smile. The kind that sits on his face without effort, as though it is the most natural position for his features to take. A young woman who had traveled a long way to study with him asked him once, "How do you smile so much? Don't you suffer? Don't you feel pain?" He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "I used to suffer terribly, every single day. But then I learned where the pain was actually coming from. And once I saw that, once I really saw it, the pain did not disappear, but it lost its power over me." The young woman asked him to explain, and he told her something that felt, at first, almost too simple. He said, "There are two movements in the mind that create almost all suffering. The first is wanting. Wanting things to be different from how they are. Wanting more. Wanting better. Wanting what someone else has. The mind reaches out constantly towards something it does not yet have. And every time it reaches, there is a gap, a feeling of not enough. The second movement is pushing away what you don't want, the difficult feeling, the uncomfortable truth, the person who said something you didn't like. The mind pushes and pushes, trying to make these things disappear. And the harder it pushes, the more present they become. These two movements, reaching for what you want and pushing away what you don't, run through almost every moment of every day. Most people don't notice them. They just feel the result. A tightness, an unease, a low hum of dissatisfaction that follows them from morning to night. They blame their circumstances. They blame other people. They blame the world. But the monk had seen something different. He had seen that the dissatisfaction was not coming from outside. It was coming from these two movements inside the mind, the reaching and the pushing. The young woman sat with this for a while. Then she said, "But isn't that just how life is? Isn't wanting natural?" The monk nodded. He said, "Yes, wanting is natural, but there is a difference between wanting and being trapped by wanting. You can want a cup of tea. That is simple. That is fine. But when the mind turns wanting into a story, when it says, 'I will never be happy unless I have this,' that is where the trap closes. And most people don't even notice the trap, because it feels exactly like normal life. Now, all of this might sound heavy. Stay with me, because what comes next makes all of it feel lighter. If suffering comes from reaching and pushing, from wanting and resisting, then there must be a way out, not a way to stop feeling things, not a way to become numb, a way to see these movements clearly enough that they no longer control you without your knowledge. And the Buddha found exactly that. He saw a truth so simple, it is easy to overlook. Everything that happens in your mind happens because of something else that happened before it. Nothing arises from nothing. A thought appears, but it appeared because of a feeling. The feeling appeared because of something you noticed. What you noticed appeared because of something that happened in the world around you. Each thing is connected to the thing before it. A chain, quiet, invisible most of the time, but there. The man in the fishing village, the one who carried the label of the angry one, he did not wake up one morning and stop being angry. What happened was quieter than that. He began to notice the chain. He began to see. The anger doesn't just appear out of nowhere. Something triggers it. A feeling of being dismissed. A memory of being small and being told he was wrong. Each time he caught himself in the middle of it, in the middle of the reaching or the pushing, he could see the shape of it. And the moment he saw it clearly, it loosened. Not always, not completely, but a little, enough. This is the crack. This is where awareness begins to dissolve what years of habit have built. Not through force, not through willpower or discipline, through seeing. The Buddha taught that awareness itself, simply noticing what is happening inside your own mind, is the most powerful force available to you. Not thinking about what is happening, not judging it, not trying to fix it, just seeing it. The way you see a cloud passing across the sky, openly, without grabbing at it, without pushing it away. The monk in Sri Lanka did not reach his peace through years of sitting still. He reached it through years of noticing. Noticing the reaching, noticing the pushing, noticing the stories his mind told him, and the feelings those stories carried, and the way his body responded to those feelings. Each time he noticed, the chain lost one link, not dramatically, quietly, the way ice thaws, so slowly you can't see it happening, until one morning you look and the ground is clear. You do not need to understand everything about why your mind works this way. You do not need to trace every chain back to its beginning. All you need is the willingness to look. When the mind tells you a story about who you are, notice it. When the reaching happens, the wanting, the grasping, notice it. When the pushing happens, the resistance, the frustration, notice it. You don't have to do anything with what you see. The seeing itself is enough. The man walked along the coast many more times after that afternoon. Some days the anger came back. Some days the label felt real again. But something had changed in how he saw himself. He could no longer fully believe it, because he had seen clearly in 30 seconds of calm that the story was not who he was. And that seeing, once it has happened, cannot be fully unseen. Now, there is a place where this kind of seeing becomes almost effortless. A place you can go right now, without moving, without doing anything at all. A place where the mind slows down on its own, not because you force it, but because of what surrounds you. We are going there next. The Buddha could have sat anywhere. He had access to halls, to rooms, to buildings built by people who wanted to honor him. But on the night everything changed. On the night he saw what he saw. He sat beneath a tree. Not inside, not in a grand place. Beneath a tree, in the open air, with the ground beneath him and the sky above. There is a reason for that. For thousands of years before the Buddha, monks and teachers in India had gone to forests, not to hide from the world, not because the world was too difficult. They went because something happens in a forest that does not happen in a room. The mind quiets, not all at once, but gradually, the way a lake settles after someone has thrown a stone into it. The ripples slow, the surface becomes still, and when the surface is still, you can see clearly to the bottom. There is a man who walks through a park near his home every morning before work. He has done this for years. The same path, the same trees, He never paid much attention to them. They were just part of the route, things he passed on his way to somewhere else. One morning, he stopped in front of an old tree. He did not plan to stop. His feet just slowed. The tree was wide, its trunk thicker than he could wrap his arms around. The bark was cracked and layered, like something that had been built up over a very long time, and the wind was moving through it. He could hear it, a soft sound, almost like breathing. The leaves were moving, turning, catching the light, and letting it go. And the trunk was completely still. The wind was there. The tree felt it. Every single leaf was proof that the wind was real. But the tree did not fight it. It did not lean away. It did not brace. It simply let the wind move through. He stood there for a long time, not thinking about anything, just watching. Trees are not just beautiful. They are teaching something. And once you begin to see what they are teaching, you will never look at one the same way again. What the tree showed this man, without words, without effort, was a way of being that he had never considered. He had spent his entire life fighting things, fighting his problems, fighting his feelings, fighting the parts of his life that did not go the way he wanted. He believed that the only way to handle difficulty was to push against it, to be stronger than whatever was coming at him. The tree showed him a different possibility, not resistance, not surrender either, something between the two, a kind of stillness that held everything without being shaken by it. The Buddha sat beneath a tree for a reason. He sat there because he understood what trees understand and what people spend their entire lives forgetting. And this is where we come to something that might feel strange at first, something the Buddha taught that no one before him had said quite so clearly. Give it time to settle, because it is the most peaceful thing you will ever hear. There was an old teacher who lived alone in a small house near a river. People came to him from far away with questions. Some came with big questions about life and death and what any of it means. Some came with smaller ones, how to handle a difficult person, how to find rest in a hard season. One day, a young man arrived who had traveled for several days to reach him. He was tired. He was confused. He sat down across from the old teacher and said, "I have one question. Who am I?" The old teacher looked at him for a long time. Then he smiled. Not a polite smile, the kind that comes from understanding something deeply. And he said, "That is the wrong question." The young man was startled. He had carried this question for years. It was the one that mattered most to him. Who am I? He looked at the teacher and asked, "Then what is the right question?" The old teacher pointed outside, toward the river. He said, "Watch the water. Is it the same water now as it was 1 hour ago?" The young man looked. No, the water was always moving, always different, never the same from one moment to the next. The teacher nodded. Then he said, "You are like that river. You are not a fixed thing sitting still somewhere. waiting to be discovered. You are a movement, a series of moments, one after another, each different from the last. The right question is not, who am I? The right question is, what is happening right now? This is what the Buddha saw beneath the tree. He looked closely at what a person actually is, not what we imagine ourselves to be, but what is there when you truly look. And what he found was this: there is no single, fixed thing at the center, no unchanging core that remains the same from the day you were born until the day you die. What there is, what you are, is a flow, a constant stream of experience, feelings arising and passing, thoughts appearing and dissolving, sensations coming and going, perceptions shifting with every single moment. None of these is you. All of them together, moving, changing, never repeating, in exactly the same way, is what you call you. This might sound like something has been taken away, like the ground has been pulled out from under you. But the Buddha did not teach this as something to fear. He taught it as the greatest freedom available to a human being. Because if you are not a fixed thing, if there is no permanent, unchanging identity at the center, then the labels cannot hold. The story your mind built when you were 7 years old, the name someone gave you in anger, the belief that you are broken or not enough or permanently damaged in some way, none of it can stick to something that is always moving. You are the river, and rivers cannot be pinned down. This might be the single most counterintuitive thing the Buddha ever taught. But give it a moment to settle, because it changes everything that comes after it. The man who watched the tree in the park did not immediately understand all of this. He did not need to. What he understood was simpler. The tree was not fighting the wind, and he had been fighting everything in his life for as long as he could remember, and the fighting was costing him more than whatever he was fighting against. There was a woman who lived in a village near a wide river in northern Myanmar. She had built a life there over many years. A small house, a garden she tended with care, a few boxes of photographs and letters that held the shape of her memories. One year, the rains came harder than anyone in the village could remember. The river swelled over its banks. The water came into the village slowly at first, then fast. Within 2 days, most of what she had built was gone. The house was flooded and ruined. The garden was underwater. The photographs, the letters, carried away or destroyed. People expected her to fall apart. Some of them did fall apart, on her behalf, as though the grief she should have been feeling had to go somewhere. They came to her with pity in their voices. "Are you all right? What can we do?" She thanked them, but what they saw on her face was not what they expected. It was not grief. It was not anger or bitterness. It was something closer to calm, a quiet steadiness that surprised even her. Later, she told a friend what happened inside her during those first days. She said, "I sat in the mud, and I looked at what was left, and I waited for the grief to come, and something else came instead. not happiness, not indifference, a clarity. I realized I had been holding all of those things. The house, the photographs, the garden, as though they were parts of me, as though if they were safe, then I was safe. But when they were gone, I was still here, still breathing, still feeling the rain on my skin, still able to notice the water moving past me. And in that noticing, something opened. I felt more peaceful than I had felt in years. This is what the Buddha meant when he spoke about peace. Not the absence of difficulty, not a life where nothing goes wrong, a steadiness inside you that does not depend on what is happening on the outside. The tree does not depend on calm weather to stand. It stands in storms. It stands in drought. It does not need the conditions to be right in order to remain a tree. This kind of steadiness is not something you are born with. It is not something you find hidden inside yourself one day, like discovering a room in your house you never knew was there. It is something that grows through noticing, again and again, what is real and what is a story the mind has built around it. The woman in Myanmar did not become cold. She still loved. She still cared about the people around her. She rebuilt piece by piece over the months that followed. But she rebuilt differently. She held things more lightly, not because she valued them less, because she had learned, in the clearest way possible, that she was not the things she owned. She was not the house. She was not the photographs. She was the one who noticed, the one who felt the rain, the one who was still here after everything was taken. The tree in the park is still standing. The man walks past it most mornings. Sometimes he stops. Sometimes he just glances at it as he passes. But he sees it differently now. He sees something that has stood in the same place for a very long time, holding still while everything around it moves, and not because it is stronger than the wind, because it does not need to be. Now that you are beginning to see yourself more clearly, beginning to notice the stories, the reaching, the pushing, something interesting happens when other people try to pull you back into the old patterns. We are going there next. Think about the last time someone said something that cut into you. Not a stranger, someone you see regularly, someone whose words land because you care what they think. A parent, a sibling, a friend you have known for years. They said something, and something in your chest tightened, and for the rest of that day, maybe longer, their words kept playing back. Not because you chose to replay them, because your mind would not let them go. This is not a small thing. This is one of the heaviest things a person carries. Not injury, not illness. Words from someone close, and the way the mind turns them over and over, adding weight each time. By the end of the day, the words have become a story. By the end of the week, the story has become a belief. And beliefs, once they settle into you, feel like the truth. They feel solid and permanent, when in fact, They are made entirely of thought. There was a woman in a village in northern India who had a sister. They had grown up together in the same house, shared the same meals, known each other their entire lives. But there was a sharpness between them, the kind that builds slowly over years, small cuts that never fully heal, each one making the next one deeper. One afternoon, the sister said something about the way the woman had raised her own daughter. It was not a loud argument. It was said quietly, almost casually, over tea, but it went straight in. The woman said nothing. She finished her tea. She walked home, and for 3 days, she could not stop hearing it. The words would come back at odd moments, while she was cooking, while she was lying in the dark before sleep, while she was watching her daughter play in the yard. Each time they came back, they carried a little more shame with them, a little more of the feeling that something was wrong with her. On the 4th morning, she sat with the feeling, not to fix it, not to plan what to say back. She just sat with it and watched what it was doing inside her. The tightness in her jaw, the heat behind her eyes, the way her mind kept building the case. She has no right to say that. She doesn't understand. Who is she to judge? She watched all of it, and then she asked herself one question. Not, what did she mean by that? But, why did that hurt so much? The answer was not about her sister. The answer was about her, about something old and tender that her sister's words had touched without meaning to. A fear she had carried since her daughter was very small, the fear that she was not doing enough, that she was failing in some way she could not name. Her sister had not put that fear there. It was already there. The words had simply found it, the way water finds the lowest point in the ground. And in seeing that, in being honest with herself about what was really there, the grip of the words loosened, not all at once, but enough. The Buddha watched people hurt each other for years. He watched the way words travel from one person into another person's body and stay there. He watched the way the mind turns a single sentence into a wound that lasts for months. And he saw something that most people take a very long time to see. The pain is not coming from the other person. The pain is coming from what you do with what they said. The words arrive. That is unavoidable. But the suffering, the days of replaying, the tightness, the story that builds on top of it, that is something the mind creates after the words have already come and gone. The other person has moved on. They may not even remember saying it. But inside you, the words are still alive, still working, still adding their weight. He said, "Hatred does not cease by hatred. It ceases by love." This is not a soft teaching. It is an observation about what actually works. When anger meets anger, both grow larger. When anger meets something that sees it clearly, without being swallowed by it, the anger begins to lose its hold. Not through force, not through effort, through seeing. But patience, real patience, not the gritting of teeth, is not something most people understand correctly. They think it means enduring, bearing what you cannot change without complaint. This is not what the Buddha meant. What he meant was something active, something that requires you to stay awake to what is happening inside you, to see the anger, the hurt, the tightness, and to not be carried away by it. To remain on solid ground while the feeling moves through you like wind through a field. The wind does not destroy the field. It moves across it, and the field is still there when the wind has passed. There was a monk who lived near a busy port town on the coast of Myanmar. Ships came and went. Sailors drank and argued in the streets at night. The noise and the disorder reached even into the monastery. The other monks found it difficult. They longed for silence. They longed for a place where no one would disturb their practice. Some of them spoke of requesting a transfer to a monastery in the hills, far from the town. This monk did not share their longing, not because he did not hear the noise. He heard everything, every shout, every laugh, every argument that spilled into the early hours. But he had understood something the others had not yet grasped. The noise was not his enemy. The resistance to the noise, that was the enemy. When you fight what is in front of you, it fills your mind completely. It becomes the only thing you can think about. When you stop fighting, it becomes just what is happening. Sound, movement, life going on. And life going on cannot hurt you. Only your judgment of it can. A younger monk asked him, "But how do you stay calm when the sailors are shouting in the middle of the night?" The older monk said, "I do not stay calm by making them quiet. I stay calm by stopping the war inside my own head. The shouting is outside. The suffering is inside. Once you see where it is actually coming from, you know where to look." The woman in the village did something similar with her sister's words. She did not go back to her sister and demand an apology. She did not cut her sister out of her life. She turned toward the pain inside herself and looked at it honestly. And in that looking, she found that the wound was not really about what her sister said. It was about something she herself had been carrying for a long time. Her sister had only opened the door to it. The door had been there all along. This is what the Buddha meant when he spoke about seeing other people clearly, not excusing harm, not pretending that hurtful words are fine, but understanding that the person who said them was also suffering, carrying their own weight, their own old wounds that had never been looked at. The sister who spoke so casually over tea, she was not cruel for the sake of cruelty. She was touching something in herself that she had no words for, and it came out sideways, aimed at the person closest to her. This is how pain moves between people, not because anyone is choosing to cause it, because the pain has to go somewhere, and it goes toward the person who is already close enough to feel it. Every person who has ever spoken sharply to you was in pain. Not always, but far more often than you think. The Buddha taught that every single being alive carries one wish inside them, the same wish, across every person, in every part of the world. Every person wants to be free from suffering, The sister wants to be free from suffering. The monk's noisy neighbors want to be free from suffering. You want to be free from suffering. The wish is the same. Only the way each person carries it is different. Some carry it quietly. Some carry it in anger. Some carry it in silence that looks like coldness. But underneath all of it, the wish is identical. When you truly see this, not as a thought you accept, but as something you feel in your body, the way you experience difficult people begins to change. Not because you forgive them in some grand gesture, because you recognize them. You see the same struggle in them that you know in yourself. And recognition, real recognition, softens something inside you that no amount of effort or willpower could touch. The monk near the port town carried this understanding with him into every night of noise. The woman carried it into every conversation with her sister. Neither of them became perfect. Neither of them stopped feeling pain, but the pain stopped controlling them. And that is the difference. Not the absence of difficulty, the absence of being ruled by it. But here is the hardest part. Seeing other people this way, with honesty, with the recognition that they are suffering too, that takes practice. But it is possible. Seeing yourself the same way, with the same honesty, with the same lack of judgment, that is where the real work begins. You have watched someone you love repeat the same mistake, year after year, the same argument with the same person, the same choice that leads to the same unhappiness. And you have sat there feeling the frustration quietly build, thinking, why can't they see it? It is right in front of them. Anyone looking from the outside could point to it and say, there, that is the thing. That is what is keeping you in pain. The Buddha noticed this. He noticed how sharply people could see the struggles of others and how completely blind they were to their own. He put it simply, it is easy to see the faults of others, but hard to see one's own. This is not a criticism. It is an observation about how the mind works. The mind looks outward with sharp eyes. It looks inward with almost none at all. There was a woman in a coastal town in Tamil Nadu who had a sister. For years, she complained about her sister to anyone who would listen. Her sister was stubborn. Her sister refused to listen to reason. Her sister would dig in her heels on the smallest things and hold her ground until an argument turned into a silence that lasted weeks. The woman told this story so often that it had become part of how she understood the world. Her sister was the difficult one. That was simply how things were. One day, she was sitting with an old friend, a woman she had known since childhood. She was in the middle of telling the familiar story about her sister when the friend paused. She did not interrupt. She waited until the woman finished. And then she said something very quiet. She said, "Have you ever noticed that you also refuse to change your mind about anything?" The woman did not answer right away, not because she was angry, because the question landed somewhere she had not expected it to land, somewhere tender, somewhere she had not looked in a very long time. She went home that evening and sat with it. Not with guilt, with curiosity. Is it true? She began to watch herself over the following days, and what she saw surprised her. She saw that she did exactly what she had been saying her sister did. She dug in. She held her position. She turned small disagreements into long silences. The pattern was there, plain as anything, and she had never once seen it. We carry a picture of ourselves in our minds, a picture of who we are, how we behave, what kind of person we are, and that picture is almost always incomplete. The parts we cannot see are not small parts. They are often the parts that cause the most trouble in our own lives and in the lives of the people closest to us. The Buddha understood this about himself. Before he found the path that led to his deepest understanding, he spent 6 years trying to reach it through extreme discipline. He fasted until his body was skeletal. He sat in positions that caused tremendous pain. He believed that if he could simply push hard enough, force his mind and body into submission, the answer would come. It did not come. 6 years of suffering, and he was no closer to understanding than when he began. Then he stopped. He looked at what he had been doing, honestly, without excusing it or defending it. He saw that the extreme path was not wisdom. It was the same grasping and forcing he had seen in everyone else, only turned inward. He had been trying to conquer himself, and you cannot conquer yourself into peace. That honesty, that willingness to look at his own behavior without flinching was the turning point. Everything that came after began there. There was a monk who lived in a monastery in the hills of Rajasthan. He was not old, but he had been practicing for many years. One season, he made a decision that the other monks found strange. He said he was going to spend 1 full year doing nothing but watching his own mind, not meditating in the way they usually understood it, not trying to achieve calm or stillness or any particular state, simply watching the way you would watch a river, letting it move, noticing what it carried, never trying to change its course. The other monks were skeptical. What would he learn from simply watching? Wasn't the point to transform? To improve? He said nothing about their doubts. He simply began. For weeks, nothing seemed to change. He sat. He watched. Thoughts came. He saw them. Feelings arose. He saw them. Judgments formed about himself, about others, about the world. He saw those too. He did not push any of it away. He did not follow any of it into a story. He just watched. But as the months passed, he started to see patterns he had never noticed before. The way his mind reacted to certain kinds of criticism, not with anger, but with a deep, quiet withdrawal. The way he compared himself to the other monks, constantly, without being aware he was doing it. The way he told himself stories about who he was, the good monk, the disciplined one, and how tightly he held those stories, as though letting go of them would mean losing himself entirely. None of these things were new. They had been happening for years. He simply had never looked closely enough to see them. At the end of the year, one of the younger monks asked him what he had learned. The monk thought about this for a long time before answering. Then he said, "I saw myself clearly for the first time, and I was both horrified and grateful." Horrified, because so much of what I had been doing was causing suffering in myself and in the people around me without my knowledge. Grateful, because once you see something clearly, it no longer has the same power over you. This is the teaching the Buddha pointed to when he spoke about self-knowledge, not self-criticism, not the heavy, punishing voice that says, "You are flawed, you are broken, you need to be fixed." That voice is just another form of blindness. It feels like honesty, but it is not. Real honesty is quieter than that. It is the simple act of looking, without flinching, without judgment, at what is actually there. No more, no less. The woman in Tamil Nadu did not feel guilty when she saw her stubbornness. She felt relieved, because the moment she could see the pattern, it was no longer invisible to her. And what is visible can be worked with. What is invisible controls you completely. She did not try to force herself to be different overnight. She simply began to notice. Each time she felt the urge to dig in, to hold her ground against all reason, and in that noticing, a small space opened. A space where she could choose. Not always, but sometimes, and sometimes was enough to begin. The monk in Rajasthan carried his year of watching with him long after it ended, not as a memory he returned to, as a way of moving through his days. He kept watching, gently, without force, the way you keep breathing, not because you decide to, but because it is simply what you do. And the watching changed how he saw other people too. Because when you have looked at your own patterns with honesty, when you have seen the places where you cause pain without meaning to, you cannot look at another person's struggles with the same harsh judgment you once carried. You have seen too much of yourself to believe that you are any different from them. This is where compassion begins. Not as a feeling you generate, not as a decision you make to be kind, as a natural result of seeing clearly. When you know, in your body, not just in your mind, that you carry the same struggles, the same blind spots, the same capacity for causing harm without knowing it, the way you hold other people changes. The judgment softens. Not because you lower your standards, because you have finally stopped pretending that you stand on different ground than everyone else. The Buddha did not reach his understanding by becoming perfect. He reached it by seeing himself honestly, by looking at 6 years of misguided effort and saying, "Yes, that is what I did. That is what it cost. And now I can see clearly." That honesty was not the end of the journey. It was the beginning of everything. Now, once this kind of seeing begins, Once you start to notice the things you have been carrying without knowing you were carrying them, you start noticing other things too. Small, quiet things. Things that have been there all along, waiting to be seen. And they change everything. Most of us learned gratitude the wrong way. We learned it as a comparison. Someone, at some point in our lives, told us, "Be grateful. You have more than other people. There are people who have less than you." And so gratitude became a kind of guilt dressed in softer clothing, a reminder that we were supposed to feel good about what we had, because someone else had less. This is not gratitude. This is comparison. And comparison, even when it makes you feel temporarily better, keeps your mind locked in the same place it was already stuck, measuring, weighing, looking at what you have, and asking, is it enough? Is it more than others? Is it what I deserve? The Buddha saw this clearly. He saw how the mind, even when it is trying to feel thankful, can slip back into the habit of wanting more, of measuring what it has against what it does not have. And he pointed towards something different, something quieter, not gratitude as a feeling you force yourself to have, but gratitude as a way of noticing what is already here, not because it is impressive or rare or better than what someone else has, but simply because it is happening right now. There was a Buddhist nun who lived in a small monastery in the hills of Ladakh. She had been practicing for over 30 years. One day, a young journalist came to speak with her, someone writing a piece about happiness, about what makes people feel content with their lives. The journalist asked her the question directly, "What are you grateful for?" The nun did not think for long. She said, "This breath, this light coming through the window, this floor beneath my feet." The journalist laughed, not unkindly, but with surprise. She had expected something grander, something about spiritual attainment, or inner peace, or the teachings she had spent decades studying. The nun smiled. She said, "You think that is small, but it is everything. Everything you are looking for is already inside what I just described. The breath, the light, the ground. If you can truly feel these things, not think about them, but feel them, there is nothing missing." The journalist did not fully understand what the nun meant. Not that day, but she carried the words with her, and months later, in a quiet moment, something in her shifted. She was washing dishes at her kitchen sink, warm water running over her hands, and for a few seconds, she stopped thinking about what came next. She simply felt the water, the warmth of it, the way it moved across her fingers. And in that feeling, something opened. Not happiness, exactly. Something steadier than happiness. Something that did not depend on anything going right. This is what the Buddha meant when he spoke about appreciative joy. Not the excitement of getting something new. Not the relief of a problem being solved. The quiet recognition that what is in front of you, right now, in this moment, is enough. Not perfect, not arranged the way you would have chosen, but enough. And this recognition is not something you arrive at through effort. It comes through noticing, through paying attention to what your senses are already receiving, and letting that attention rest there without immediately turning it into a question or a problem to solve. But gratitude, when it is real, does something to a person that goes beyond feeling good. It changes what you want. Most people spend a very large part of their lives wanting things to be different, wanting more, wanting what they do not have. The wanting is not wrong. It is natural, but it creates a gap, a constant sense that where you are is not where you should be. And that gap is one of the deepest sources of restlessness in a human life. When you begin to notice what is already here, truly notice it, with your full attention, the gap begins to close. Not because your circumstances have changed, because your relationship to your circumstances has changed. There was a merchant who lived in a city in ancient Bengal. He was wealthy by the standards of his time. He had a large house. He had fine food. He had servants and trade routes and influence in the community. By every visible measure, he had what a person was supposed to want. And yet something was wrong. He could not name it exactly. A hollowness, a feeling that no matter how much he acquired, the feeling of emptiness did not leave. It stayed with him through meals, through business dealings, through evenings with his family. It was always there, beneath everything else. He heard that there was a monk living in the forest outside the city, a man who owned nothing, ate once a day, and slept on the ground. The merchant was curious. He traveled to the forest and sat with the monk for an afternoon. He told the monk about his life, about his wealth, about his emptiness. He said, "I have everything, but I feel as though I have nothing." The monk listened. Then he said, "You have everything except the one thing that makes everything enough." The merchant asked, "What is that?" The monk said, "Contentment, not satisfaction with what you have achieved. Contentment with what is. These are two very different things. One is a feeling that comes after you get what you wanted. The other is a feeling that is available right now, without anything changing at all." The merchant did not leave the city and become a monk. That was not the teaching. The teaching was simpler than that. The monk said to him, "The Buddha taught that health is the highest gain. Contentment is the highest wealth. A trusted friend is the best relative." The merchant had heard teachings before, but this time, sitting in the forest with nothing around him but trees and earth, and the sound of water somewhere nearby, he heard it differently, not as words, as a fact. The monk in front of him, this man with no possessions, no roof, no security, was more at ease than the merchant had felt in years. That ease was not pretend. It was not a performance of spiritual contentment. It was the way the monk sat, the way he breathed, the way he looked at a cup of water as though it were the most interesting thing in the world. The merchant went home. He did not sell his house or give away his wealth, but he began to do something small. Each morning, before the day started, before the wanting began, the wanting for business to go well, for his children to behave, for the world to cooperate, he would sit for a few minutes and simply feel what was already there. The warmth of the morning air, the sound of birds outside his window, the fact that he was alive and breathing, and his body was carrying him through another day. It did not fix the emptiness all at once, but it began to fill it, slowly, the way rain fills a dry well, not with one pour, but with many small ones, over time. There was a man who worked in an office in a busy part of Kyoto. His days were full. Meetings followed by meetings, deadlines, the constant low hum of things that needed to be done. He ate lunch at his desk most days, quickly, while looking at something on his screen. He had done this for so long that he had stopped noticing he was eating at all. One day, for no particular reason, he decided to eat outside. A small park was nearby, just a few benches and a patch of grass between buildings. He brought his lunch, rice, a piece of fish, some vegetables, and sat on a bench. He left his phone in his pocket. For the first few minutes, his mind was restless. It wanted to check something. It wanted to plan the afternoon. It wanted to be somewhere else, doing something more productive. But he stayed. He ate. He tasted the rice, actually tasted it. For the first time in months, he felt the sun on the side of his face. He listened to the sound of the street nearby, cars, voices, a dog barking somewhere. And after a few minutes, the restlessness quieted. Not completely, but enough that something else could be felt underneath it. Peace. Not the dramatic kind. Not the kind that comes after a crisis has passed or a problem has been solved. The kind that is simply there, underneath the noise, underneath the wanting, when you stop moving long enough to feel it. He sat for 15 minutes. When he went back inside, nothing in his life had changed. His deadlines were the same. His responsibilities were the same, but something in the way he carried them had shifted. He said, later, to a friend, I realized I had been searching for peace in all the wrong places. I had been looking for it in the future, when things would calm down, when I would finally have time. But it was there the whole time, in the rice, in the sun, in 15 minutes of paying attention. The nun in Ladakh understood this. The monk in the forest understood this. The man in Kyoto stumbled into it. And what they all touched, in different ways, in different places, was the same thing. That the life you already have, the ordinary, unremarkable, daily life, contains everything you have been looking for. Not in spite of being ordinary, because it is ordinary, because it is real, because it is here, right now, and your senses are already receiving it. The only thing standing between you and the peace you are looking for is the habit of looking past it. The Buddha did not teach people to become detached from life. He taught them to become more present to it, to stop skipping over what is in front of them in search of something better. Because the better thing, the thing that actually satisfies, is not somewhere ahead. It is not waiting at the end of a list of achievements. It is in the breath, in the light, in the warmth of water on your hands, in a meal eaten slowly, with nothing else competing for your attention. These are not consolation prizes. These are the substance of a life. The merchant in Bengal began to notice his wealth differently after that afternoon in the forest. Not that it mattered less, but that it mattered in a quieter way. It was useful. It kept his family fed and sheltered. But it was no longer the thing he was chasing. The chasing had stopped, because the emptiness it was meant to fill had begun to fill itself through attention, through noticing, through the simple act of being awake to what was already there. Now, with this kind of seeing, this quiet noticing of what is already in front of you, you begin to notice something else too. Something less comfortable. The old patterns. The ones you did not choose. The ones that were handed to you long before you were old enough to ask whether they fit. And working with those patterns, that is where the next part of this teaching begins. Think about how you respond when someone you are close to disappoints you. The specific way you go quiet, or the specific way your voice changes, or the way you leave the room without saying why. Now think about where you learned that. Not from a book, not from a teacher, from watching someone do it. Someone in your family. Someone who was close to you when you were very young. Suffering does not only live inside one person. It moves. It passes from one person to the next, not through blood, but through behavior, through the small, unconscious habits that one generation carries and the next generation absorbs without ever being told it is happening. A mother pushes people away when she is afraid. Her daughter watches this without understanding what it is. And years later, the daughter does the same thing, in the same way, at the same moments, and does not know where it came from. There was a young woman in a town in Mysore who noticed this about herself quite late. She was in her late 20s. She had been in several close friendships, and each one had ended the same way. When the friendship became deep, when the other person began to rely on her, or when she began to feel truly needed, something in her would tighten. She would pull back, not with words, with distance. She would stop returning calls. She would become unavailable, and the friendship would slowly die, and she would feel both relieved and sad, and she would not understand why she had done it. One evening, she was visiting her mother. They were sitting together after dinner, and the conversation turned to an old friend of her mother's, someone her mother had been close to decades ago. Her mother's face changed when she talked about this person. Something closed. Something that the young woman recognized immediately, not because she had seen it before, but because she felt it in herself. The same tightening, the same pulling inward. Her mother had done this her entire life, pushed people away when they got too close. And the young woman had learned it, absorbed it, the way a child absorbs everything, silently, completely, without choice. The moment she saw this, something shifted. Not guilt, not anger toward her mother, something closer to recognition. She saw the pattern clearly, where it came from, how it had taken root in her, how it had been shaping her life without her knowledge. And in seeing it, the pattern did not disappear, but it loosened, because a pattern that you cannot see controls you completely. A pattern that you can see, you can begin to work with. The Buddha understood how this works. He saw that actions have consequences, not only for the person who acts, but for everyone connected to them. When a person acts from anger, the anger does not stop with them. It moves outward. It lands in the people around them. And if those people do not see it, if they absorb it without awareness, they will carry it forward into their own lives, into their own relationships, into the next generation. This is not punishment. This is simply how things connect. When this exists, that comes to be. One thing gives rise to the next, and the chain continues until someone, somewhere in it, becomes aware enough to see what is happening. There was a family in a village in Gujarat that carried anger through 3 generations. The grandfather was known for his temper, not cruel, not the kind of anger that seeks to destroy, but sharp, quick to flare. When something did not go as he expected, his voice would rise, and the room would go still. Everyone in the family knew to move carefully around him when he was in one of these moods. His son grew up in that atmosphere. He did not become his father exactly. His anger expressed itself differently, more quietly, more through withdrawal than through shouting. But the core of it was the same inability to sit with frustration, the same need to push it outward when it built up inside. And his son, the grandson, began to show the same signs. A quickness to irritation, a tightness in the jaw when things did not go his way. The pattern was moving through the family like water through rock, slowly, invisibly, carving the same channel each time. The grandson was about 22 when his own child was born. A boy. For the first year, everything was fine. The child was small, and the small frustrations of parenthood were manageable. But as the boy grew older, as he began to test boundaries the way all young children do, the grandson started to feel it. The familiar tightness, the flare of irritation when the boy knocked something over, or refused to listen, or cried without apparent reason. One afternoon, the boy did something small, spilled water across a table, soaking papers the grandson had been working on. Nothing serious, the kind of thing that happens 100 times in any household. The grandson felt the anger rise. He felt his jaw tighten. He felt his voice prepare to sharpen. And then something stopped him. Not willpower, not a conscious decision to be patient. A flash of seeing, He saw, in that single second, exactly what was about to happen. He saw his father doing the same thing. He saw his grandfather doing the same thing. He saw the chain stretching back behind him, and he saw that his son was about to become the next link in it. He paused. Just paused. He did not act on the anger. He did not push it down with effort. He simply stood in that second and let it be there without following it. The boy looked up at him, water still dripping from the table. The grandson took a breath. He said, quietly, "It is all right. We will clean it up." That was the moment. Not a grand gesture, not a lifetime of practice or years of study. One moment of seeing, one moment where the pattern was visible and the person in it chose, without planning to choose, not to continue it. The anger did not disappear from his life after that day. It still arose, but he had seen the chain clearly enough that it could no longer move through him without his knowledge. And that made all the difference. The Buddha taught that you are not trapped by what was passed to you. The patterns are real. They are deep. They have been forming for longer than your own life. But they are not permanent. They are not fixed into you like something carved in stone. They are habits. And habits, no matter how old, can be interrupted. Not all at once, not perfectly, but in moments, in single seconds where awareness comes in and the automatic response does not happen. And each one of those seconds changes what comes next. The young woman in Mysore did not stop herself from ever pulling away from people again, but she began to notice when it was happening. She began to feel the tightness before she acted on it. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, she would stay. She would let the discomfort be there, and she would not run from it. And in those moments, she was not only changing her own life, she was changing the pattern itself, loosening it, making it less likely to pass forward. This is what the Buddha pointed to when he said, "You yourself must strive. No one else can do this work for you. No teacher can see your patterns for you. No teaching, no matter how profound, will break the chain on your behalf. The seeing has to happen in you. The pausing has to happen in you. The moment of awareness, the one where the pattern becomes visible, that is yours alone. But when it happens, when you see what has been moving through you without your knowledge, the effects of that seeing reach far beyond your own life. The grandson in Gujarat carried something different into his son's childhood after that afternoon. Not perfection. He still lost his temper sometimes. He was still human, still carrying what had been given to him. But the automatic passing forward, the unconscious handing down of anger from one generation to the next, that chain had been touched. Something had been interrupted, and his son grew up in a slightly different atmosphere than the one his father had grown up in. Not completely different, but different enough. And that difference, small as it seemed, was the beginning of something new in that family. The Buddha did not say that one moment of awareness would end all suffering. He said something more honest than that. He said that each action you take, each moment of seeing or not seeing, gives rise to what comes next. If you act from blindness, blindness continues. If you act from awareness, even a single flash of it, awareness enters the chain, and once it enters, it cannot be fully removed. It stays. It works quietly, over time, changing what the pattern looks like, loosening what was tight, opening what was closed. Your practice, the quiet, daily act of noticing what is happening inside you, is not only for you, it is for the people you will interact with tomorrow, for the children who are watching you, without knowing they are watching, for the patterns that have been moving through your family for longer than anyone can remember. When you see clearly, the clarity does not stay inside you. It moves outward, the same way the suffering moved outward, through the same connections, through the same quiet, invisible channels. Only this time, what is traveling is not blindness, it is light. And this brings us to one of the most quietly powerful teachings the Buddha ever gave. A teaching about how everything, absolutely everything, is connected, not in a distant, abstract way, in a way you can feel, right now, in the life you are living. Pick up a cup of tea, hold it in your hands for a moment, feel the warmth of it against your palms. This small, ordinary thing, this cup of tea you are holding, did not come from nowhere. It came from rain that fell on a hillside somewhere, soaked into the soil, was drawn up through roots and into leaves over weeks and months. It came from sun, years of sun hitting those leaves, feeding them, turning them green. It came from the hands of someone who picked those leaves early in the morning, when the air was still cool, bending and reaching, and placing them carefully into a basket. It came from the earth that held the roots, from the worms that loosened the soil, from the water that carried minerals up from deep underground. All of this is inside your cup, right now, in your hands. You cannot separate the tea from any of it. The tea is all of it, together. Most of us move through our days as though things exist on their own, as though the food we eat appeared on the shelf, as though the clothes we wear materialized from nowhere, as though our own lives, our thoughts, our feelings, our habits, are ours alone, separate from everything else. But nothing works that way. Nothing in the world exists by itself. Everything you can name, every person, every object, every feeling, exists only because of its connections to other things. Remove the connections, and the thing itself ceases to exist. There was a gardener who lived in a village in the hills of Karnataka. He had tended the same garden for 30 years. Not a large garden, a modest plot behind his house. Fruit trees, vegetables, a few flowering plants that his wife had loved before she died. He spent hours there each day, digging, watering, watching what grew and what did not. In the early years, he thought of himself as the one making things happen. He was the gardener. The plants were his work. When a mango tree produced fruit, he felt pride. When something withered, he felt failure. But over the decades, something changed in how he understood his role. He began to notice how much was happening that had nothing to do with him. The way the soil changed with the seasons. The way insects pollinated the flowers without being asked. The way rain came, or did not come, entirely on its own schedule. He was part of it, but he was not the center of it. One evening, a neighbor asked him what he had learned in 30 years of gardening. The gardener thought for a while. Then he said, "I used to think I was growing the flowers. Then I realized the flowers were growing me." This is what the Buddha saw when he looked at the world. Not a collection of separate things existing side by side. A web, a vast, intricate web, in which every thread depends on every other thread. Pull one thread, and the whole cloth moves. Remove one thread, and the cloth begins to fall apart. Nothing in it stands alone. Nothing in it is truly independent. Everything arises because of conditions, and those conditions are themselves arising because of other conditions. On and on, endlessly, in every direction. He described this with an image that is difficult to forget once you have heard it. Imagine a net, vast beyond measuring, stretching in every direction as far as you can see. And at every point where the threads cross, at every single junction, there is a jewel. Not a small jewel, a jewel so brilliantly polished that it reflects everything around it. Every other jewel in the net is visible inside it. And those jewels, the ones reflected inside the first jewel, each reflect every other jewel inside themselves. So the reflections go on, deeper and deeper, without end. Each jewel contains the entire net, and the entire net is held together by each jewel. This is not a metaphor for something else. It is a description of how things actually are. You are one of those jewels. The person sitting next to you is one of those jewels. The gardener in Karnataka is one. The person who picked the tea leaves is one. The rain that fed the soil is one. And each of you reflects every other, not because you are the same person, not because your lives are identical, but because you are woven together through conditions, through causes and effects that stretch back further than any single mind can trace. A young girl, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, was sitting with her grandmother one afternoon in a village in Arunachal Pradesh. They were shelling beans together, a task the grandmother had done 1,000 times, and the girl was learning for the first time. The girl's hands were small and clumsy, and the beans kept slipping, but the grandmother did not rush her. At some point, the girl looked up and asked, "Am I connected to everyone? To all the people in the world?" The grandmother did not answer immediately. She held a bean in her fingers and looked at it for a moment. Then she said, "You are a single thread in a cloth so vast that you can never see the whole of it. But every thread holds every other thread up. Take your thread out, and the cloth is weaker, not broken, but changed, permanently changed. The girl thought about this. Then she asked, "Does that mean what I do matters?" The grandmother smiled. She said, "Everything you do matters. Not because the world is watching, because the cloth feels it." This is a teaching that can feel heavy if you hold it the wrong way. If you take it as a burden, everything I do has consequences. I must be careful. I must get it right. It becomes another source of pressure, another reason to feel anxious about your place in the world. But that is not how the Buddha meant it. He meant it the other way, not as a weight to carry, as a reason to pay attention. Because if everything is connected, if your life is woven into the lives of everyone around you, then every small act of kindness you do is not small at all. It moves through the cloth. It reaches threads you will never see. And every moment of awareness you bring to your own life, every time you notice what is happening inside you and choose not to act from blindness, that too moves outward, quietly, without announcement. But really, the gardener in Karnataka understood this. He did not tend his garden because he expected gratitude from the mango trees. He tended it because he had seen, over 30 years of watching, that his care and the garden's growth were not two separate things. They were one thing, moving together. His hands in the soil were part of the same web as the rain and the roots and the insects. He was not outside the garden, doing something to it. He was inside it, part of its becoming. The grandmother knew this too, in the way she taught the girl to shell beans. She did not rush. She did not correct harshly, because she understood that the girl's learning was not separate from her own patience. The girl's hands finding their rhythm was connected to the grandmother's steady presence beside her. One held the other up, the way every thread holds every other thread up. This is where compassion comes from, not as a decision, not as an effort to be good, but as a natural seeing. When you truly understand that nothing exists alone, that the person in front of you is woven into the same cloth as you are, caring about them is not something you have to make yourself do. It is simply what happens when you see clearly. The separation that makes cruelty possible, the feeling that the other person is somewhere else, in a different world, unconnected to yours, that separation is an illusion. And once the illusion begins to dissolve, what is left is not obligation. It is recognition. The same recognition the gardener felt toward the soil. The same recognition the grandmother carried into the quiet afternoon with her granddaughter. A seeing that says, we are not apart. We never were. The Buddha did not teach people to lose themselves in others. He did not say, dissolve your boundaries, give up your individuality, become one with everything. He said something more precise than that. He said, see how things actually connect, not in theory, in the cup of tea you are holding, in the food you ate this morning, in the conversation you had yesterday, in the breath you are taking right now, which was air a moment ago, shared by everyone in this world, and will be air again the moment you release it. You are not separate from the world. You are not apart from other people. You are a jewel in the net, and every other jewel is inside you, reflecting. The gardener spent his last years simply sitting in his garden, not working, not growing anything new, just sitting among the things he had tended for so long, feeling the connections he had spent decades learning to see. The sun on his face was the same sun that fed the leaves. The air he breathed was the air the flowers breathed. He was not separate from any of it. He had never been. He had simply taken 30 years to notice. And now, with all of this settling into you, this understanding of how deeply connected everything is, let us talk about something the Buddha taught that completely overturns what most people believe about abundance, about what it means to have enough, and about where true wealth actually comes from. We live in a world that has one answer to every problem. The answer is more. More money, more success, more things, more comfort, more of whatever it is you do not yet have. And somewhere inside each of us, we believe this. We believe that the feeling we are looking for, the feeling of being full, of being satisfied, of finally having enough, is on the other side of something we have not yet reached. It is waiting for us at a certain point, and once we get there, we will feel it. The Buddha looked at this belief and saw it for what it was, a trap, not because wanting is wrong, but because the trap works in a very specific way. You want something, you get it. For a short time, sometimes very short, you feel good. And then the feeling fades, and you want something else, something more, and the cycle begins again. The wanting never ends. Not because you are greedy, not because something is wrong with you, because the wanting itself is the thing that is driving, and it does not stop when it gets what it asked for. It simply asks for something new. There was a king in ancient India who ruled over a large territory. He was not a cruel king. He was generous to his people. He built temples. He funded festivals. He surrounded himself with beautiful things, art, music, fine food, silk, gold. And none of it filled him. He could feel, beneath all the comfort and the richness, a hollow space that nothing he owned could touch. He had been trying to fill it for decades. Each time he acquired something new, a new building, a new piece of land, a new pleasure, the hollow space remained exactly where it was. He heard that there was a monk living in the forest at the edge of his territory, a man who owned nothing at all, no roof, no possessions beyond a single cloth to wear. He ate once a day, whatever was offered to him, and he slept on the ground. The king was curious, and, if he was honest, slightly irritated. How could a man with nothing be at peace, when a man with everything could not? He rode out to the forest to ask, He found the monk sitting beneath a tree, watching a stream. The king sat down across from him, awkwardly, because kings do not usually sit on the ground. He told the monk about his life, about everything he had, about the emptiness that would not leave. And then he asked, "How do you have so much peace with so little?" The monk looked at him quietly for a moment. Then he said, "How do you have so little peace with so much?" The king did not have an answer. The monk did not press him for one. He simply said, "The peace you are looking for is not something you can acquire. You cannot buy it. You cannot build it. You cannot earn it. It is already here. It has been here the entire time. But the wanting, the constant reaching for the next thing, makes so much noise inside you that you cannot feel it." The king sat with this for a long time. The stream moved past them. A bird landed nearby and picked at the ground. The afternoon light changed, and for a few minutes, just a few, the king stopped reaching, and in that stopping, he felt something he had not felt in years. A quietness, a stillness that had nothing to do with his surroundings, and everything to do with the fact that his mind had, for once, gone silent. This is what the Buddha meant when he spoke about true abundance, not the accumulation of things, not the achievement of a certain standard of living, the recognition that what you already have, right now, in this moment, is enough. Not perfect, not arranged the way you would have chosen, but enough, complete, full in a way that no amount of acquiring can ever produce. There was a teacher who lived in a small town in the hills of Uttarakhand. She taught young people, not in a formal school, but in her home, in the afternoons, when they came to learn reading and writing and simple arithmetic. One day, she set down the books. She said, "Close your eyes." The students looked at each other, uncertain, but they closed their eyes. She said, "Notice your breathing, not to change it, just to feel it. The air coming in, the air going out. Notice the warmth of your own body, the fact that your heart is beating right now, without you doing anything at all. Notice that you are alive." She let them sit in silence for a few minutes. Then she said, "That is abundance. Everything else, the things you might own someday, the things you might achieve, that is all fine. But abundance, the real kind, is this. What you just felt, it is already yours. It has always been yours. No one can take it from you." The students did not fully understand what she meant that day. They were young. The world had not yet taught them to want. But some of them carried the moment with them, quietly, without examining it, into their adult lives. And years later, when the wanting came, when the hollow feeling arrived and told them they needed more, some of them remembered. Not the words, the feeling, the stillness of those few minutes, with their eyes closed. And the memory was enough, sometimes, to interrupt the wanting, just for a moment. But a moment was enough to let something else in. The Buddha did not teach people to stop wanting entirely. That would be like teaching a river to stop flowing. Wanting is part of how the mind works. It arises. It is there. But there is a difference between wanting that comes from a real need, wanting food because you are hungry, wanting shelter because you are cold, and wanting that comes from a hole inside you that has nothing to do with what is missing from your life. The second kind of wanting, the kind that says, I will be happy when I have this. I will be complete when I achieve that. That is the wanting the Buddha was pointing to. Not because it is sinful, because it does not work. It promises something it cannot deliver, and the person who keeps chasing it spends their life running toward a horizon that moves every time they get closer. The king went back to his palace after that afternoon in the forest. He did not give away his wealth. He did not become a monk. The teachings were never about renunciation for its own sake. But something in how he held his life changed. The acquiring did not stop, but it stopped being the thing that mattered most. He began to notice, slowly, without forcing it, the moments in his day that had nothing to do with what he owned. The taste of water after a long ride, the sound of rain on the palace roof at night, the warmth of his grandchild's hand in his. These things had always been there. He had simply been too busy reaching for the next thing to feel them. This is the quiet revolution the Buddha was describing, not the end of desire, the end of believing that desire is the only path to fullness. You can still act. You can still create. You can still work toward things that matter to you. But when the foundation beneath all of that is fullness, when you already feel complete, even before the wanting is satisfied, the action changes. It becomes lighter, less desperate, less like running towards something, and more like moving through your life with your eyes open. The teacher in Uttarakhand lived a simple life. She did not have much by the world's standards, but she was never described by the people who knew her as someone who was lacking. She was described as someone who was full, not full of things, full of presence, full of attention, the kind of fullness that does not come from outside, the kind that was there all along, waiting to be noticed. The hole that the wanting tries to fill, the one the king felt in the middle of all his wealth, was never really a hole. It was a silence, a quiet space that existed beneath the noise of constantly reaching for more. And that silence was not empty. It was full, full of everything that was already there. The breath, the warmth, the aliveness of being a person in a world. The wanting covered it, like noise covering music. Stop the noise, and the music is still playing. It never stopped. And this brings us to the final teaching in this journey, the one that holds everything else together, the one that the Buddha returned to again and again, because it is the heart of everything he taught. And it is the one that, when you truly feel it, not just understand it, but feel it, changes the way you move through the rest of your life. There was a Tibetan monk who was asked a question that most people would find very simple. The question was, what is the purpose of Buddhism? not the history of it, not the philosophy, not the practices or the centuries of tradition. Just, what is it for? The monk thought about this. Then he said, to reduce suffering. That is it. Everything else is commentary. This was not a casual answer. It was the most precise thing he could have said. Because when you strip away everything, the rituals, the philosophies, the long chains of teaching, that is what remains. One direction, not the pursuit of happiness, not the achievement of a spiritual state, the reduction of suffering in yourself, in the people around you, in the world. And the single most effective way to do that, the thing the Buddha returned to, again and again, across decades of teaching, was kindness. Not kindness as sweetness, not kindness as being agreeable, not the kind of kindness that smiles and avoids conflict. Kindness as the deepest form of seeing. Kindness that comes from understanding exactly what another person is carrying, because you have carried it yourself. Kindness that does not need to be manufactured, because it arises on its own when you stop believing that you are separate from the people in front of you. The Dalai Lama said something about this that has been repeated so often it has almost lost its weight. He said, "My religion is kindness." But when he said it, he did not mean it as something pleasant. He meant it as the most radical statement a person can make. That after all the study, after all the years of practice, the thing that matters most is this: how you treat the people in front of you, how you respond when someone is suffering, how you move through your day when no one is watching and no one will ever know what you chose to do. Kindness in this sense is not soft. It is one of the most demanding things a person can practice, because it requires you to see clearly, honestly, what is happening in front of you, not what you wish were happening, not the version of events that protects you from feeling uncomfortable. What is actually there? The other person's pain, the reason behind their words, the way their struggle connects to yours. Most people find it easier to judge. Judgment is fast. It takes a second. Seeing takes longer. It takes the willingness to stay with something uncomfortable until it shows you what it is. There was a village in the hills of Himachal Pradesh where two families had been in conflict for years. Not a violent conflict, the quiet, grinding kind. Disputes about land, words spoken at gatherings that left marks. Children growing up hearing one version of the story from their parents and believing it completely. The conflict had gone on so long that no one remembered exactly how it started, only that it was there, and it was bitter, and it cast a shadow over everyone in the village. An elder woman, someone known for her steadiness, was asked to help settle it. She did not sit the two families down and ask them to state their grievances. She did not weigh the facts and make a judgment. Instead, she spent a week watching. She visited each family separately. She sat with them during meals. She listened, not just to the words, but to the tone beneath them. the tightness, the old hurt underneath the anger. She watched how the elders' faces changed when the other family was mentioned. She watched all of it, without deciding anything. At the end of the week, she gathered both families together. Everyone expected her to announce a verdict. Who was right? Who was wrong? Instead, she said, "You are both in pain. You are both afraid. Not of each other, of something older than this fight. Something that was there before the argument about land ever began." She paused. Then she said, "Not in the land. In the fear, if we start there, in the place where you are both standing, we can find a way forward, but only if you are willing to see each other as you actually are, not as enemies, as people who are hurting." The conflict did not end that day. Conflicts that deep rarely do. But something shifted in the room, because someone had finally looked at the whole picture, not just the surface, not just the complaints, but the fear and the pain underneath both sides. And that looking opened something that had seemed permanently closed. This is what the Buddha meant by wisdom, not cleverness, not the ability to solve problems quickly, the ability to see the whole of a situation, not just one piece of it, to hold two people's pain at the same time without choosing a side, to look past what someone did and into why they did it. Wisdom and kindness are not two separate things. They are the same thing, seen from two directions. Wisdom sees clearly. Kindness acts from that clarity. Without the seeing, kindness becomes hollow. Without the kindness, wisdom becomes cold. The elder woman carried both. She did not rush to comfort the families. She watched first. She understood first. And when she finally spoke, what she said was not advice. It was a mirror. She showed them what she had seen, and the showing itself was the kindness. Now, you will never see the full reach of what you do. When you choose, in a single moment, not to pass your anger forward, you will never see where that choice lands. When you look at someone who has hurt you and see them as a person in pain instead of an enemy, you will not see the ripple that creates. It moves outward from you, invisibly. The way the gardener's care moved through the soil and into the roots and into the fruit. You will not see it, but it is there. It is real. It reaches places you will never visit, touches people you will never meet. The grandmother who taught her granddaughter to shell beans carried a ripple like this. The monk who sat with the king in the forest carried one. The woman who saw her stubbornness and began, slowly, to loosen it, carried one. The grandson who paused, just paused, before his anger reached his son, carried one. None of them knew the shape of what they were creating. None of them needed to. The act itself was enough. The seeing was enough. The choosing, again and again, in small moments that no one else witnessed, not to add more weight to the world. The Buddha did not promise a perfect world. He did not teach a way to make suffering disappear. What he taught was quieter than that. He showed people how to stop adding to the suffering that was already here. How to interrupt the chains that carried pain from one person to the next. How to see in the middle of an ordinary day, what was actually happening, and how to respond to it with the kind of attention that changes things. Not loudly, not dramatically, but really. This is what we began with, at the very start of this journey. Not manifestation, not the belief that if you want something hard enough, or think about it clearly enough, the world will bend to give it to you. The Buddha looked at that belief and saw that it was turned backwards. The world does not arrange itself around your wanting. Your wanting arranges itself around the world. And the moment you begin to stop, to actually stop, believing that the world owes you something, the moment you turn toward what is already here and meet it with kindness, everything changes. Not the outside, the inside, the way you carry your life, the way you hold the people in it, the way you walk through each day, awake to what is in front of you. That is the teaching, not a technique, not a system, a way of seeing, a way of being present to what is in front of you and choosing again and again the response that does not add to the weight of the world. Kindness, wisdom, attention, these three, together, this is what the Buddha spent his life pointing toward. And this is what you have been quietly touching throughout this entire journey. You do not need to hold on to anything you heard today. Not tightly, not as something you must remember perfectly or practice correctly. Just feel where you are right now, the weight of your body, the breath moving in and out, the sounds around you, whatever they are. This is where everything began, and this is where it returns. Not once, again and again, every time you forget, and you will forget, because forgetting is part of being human, you come back here, to this breath, to this moment, to the quiet that was underneath everything the whole time. That is not failure. That is the practice. Wherever you are in the world tonight, whatever city, whatever room, whatever part of your life you are carrying, thank you for spending this time here, for sitting with these teachings, for being willing to look. You are not alone in this. Others are listening too, seeking the same quiet, trying in the same imperfect way. The Buddha said, "Be your own refuge. Be your own shelter. The light you are looking for is not somewhere else. It is here. It has always been here. Take care of your heart.